Sure. Oh, go ahead and mute.
You want to watch a movie? Max, you want to watch a movie?
Okay, well, somewhere on here, there is there's a thing for sharing to Facebook, but it happened to me last week, I think, too, is where it didn't show up, and they just changed things around on this thing. Oh, shucks, I'm just not seeing it where the where I can share to Facebook or either that or YouTube. It doesn't even have it on here. Do you ever run into that, Joseph, with your stuff?
When in doubt, go to Google.
And ask where it's at?
9 times out of 10, it works for me.
Okay, well.
Somebody has put out a YouTube on it, and sure enough, bingo.
Yeah, I was yeah. Well, it is just not. It says to hover over, click on more and hover over live broadcasting. Well, live broadcasting is not on there. So I don't know what the deal is. So, all right. Well, I don't know. I don't want to delay it too long, but
Rabbi, is this a recording that will record, but you can put it on YouTube later?
well, I can record it to my own computer. I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, I do it every week. I record to my own computer, but then knowing how to put that back onto to
Uh,
Facebook and all that I don't know.
yeah, I hear you. Okay.
Because I mean, it last week or two weeks ago, something like that, it did this, and then I clicked on a couple of things, and then I clicked off of it, and then went back over to it. There it was. So I really don't know why it's doing that.
That is just another slow load up.
Well, um,
Well, you hear the thunder we have out here, right, Steve? I mean,
yeah,
it could be the weather doing that. Whatever, maybe.
maybe I don't.
Blowing the towers around.
Well, the only other thing I would know to do is be reboot Zoom, and I don't want to do that. So yeah, if it doesn't show up, it doesn't show up. All right, then let's go ahead and get cranking here on this tonight, and because I'm only going to do like 13 verses tonight, because I don't like trying to rush through something so fast that I missed the last 6 or 7 or 8 verses. You just zoom through them and don't take any time with them. So anyway, I don't like doing that. All right. Oh well.
Shalom.
Hey, Shalom, Warren.
Well, we are definitely living in a time where we're
For
seeing
whatever
the
reason, they
hand
had
of
a meeting
God
in the other
move,
kitchen.
where we're
So
seeing
anything
prayers
gonna be picked
of
up.
protection and guidance fulfilled right before our very eyes. So we live in an amazing time.
Yeah, yeah, we do. Um, I was, yeah, I was, I was gonna, I was gonna go to local neighborhood ice cream social yesterday after service. Came home, just checked the internet, and then of course, that was about 30 minutes before I was supposed to go to there. 15 minutes before I was supposed to go to the ice cream thing, and of course that was when they were shooting up the former president, former and future president. So it was kind of ugly. I didn't go to the ice cream thing. Stayed glued to that for the rest of the night.
You know,
Alan, yeah,
I was talking with somebody today, and not really a believer, and explaining how, first of all, there's such a concerted amount of prayer going up before the Lord, myself included, before this even happened, because we were expecting something like this at some point to take place, and we were praying all kinds of protection upon President Trump, and 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 I was explaining to this man here how if President Trump had not turned his head exactly when he did, he'd be dead right now, and that is obviously the hand of God. That
Oh,
did this,
absolutely.
that
Mhm.
this is a miracle. But yet,
Yeah.
but they said, but as far as he's
100%.
concerned, he's saying it's a coincidence. It's a great coincidence, but it's a coincidence. So I mean, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. But
Yeah,
that's the blindness that we're dealing with.
yeah. Well, I'm telling you, there's also no coincidence with God. So,
Amen.
That's
um,
right.
That's right.
this was I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand the all that's going on with this stuff and why. And I do know that just looking over the security detail and all of the stuff that they did, um, I got more questions than people have answers for. Let's just say it that way.
Yeah, there are definitely some questions to be asked, and I'm sure we're going to find out. It's going to be an interesting week for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yes, Rabbi, we did this for a living. You know, there's some big questions that need to be answered.
yeah, that's right. I mean, I can't tell you how many security things I've done in my life, and
Yeah.
um, I had a job at one point, and my job was to take high profile diplomats and get them into a country and get them out of a country and stuff like that. And
Alive.
so and try not to get caught and try not to get shot. So it was I was successful on both accounts all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there
any
were some lapses for sure. So
yeah,
we're gonna learn about those, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So well, we could talk about this all night and I wouldn't get into my lesson. So
I know.
Alan, you had your mic open. Were you wanting to say something? Alan, did you have something to say?
No, Steve, I turned my mic on because I got a note that said you wanted me to turn it on.
What? Okay, I'm sorry. No, I didn't tell you to do that.
Good enough.
I'm just punching buttons over here so fast and furious trying to get this thing to share to Facebook and it won't do it. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to class and
Yeah, we need a nice prayer from you tonight, Rabbi.
all right, here we go. So I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody and we don't have any newbies here tonight. So here we go. Begin with the blessing, of course. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in words of Torah. All right, so tonight we're going to do the first 13 verses of chapter 12. And if you look at the structure of those 13 verses, you'll see that it is chiastic in structure, and the first 3 verses are a call to endurance of the people, and then the 4 to 11, they're talking about what Yeshua went through, his suffering, and what all of that means, and then the last 2 verses goes back to the call to endure and go back into endurance. So that's the overall structure of the first 13 verses of chapter 12. And then I've got another chiastic structure, and this is just on the first 2 verses, and it's much more detailed, and it shows that, okay, it works its way down to here in the middle there, focusing on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter of faith. So that's where, typically a chiastic structure goes down to the most important theme of those scriptures, and then it repeats itself back out to the original premise. And so that's kind of the way this one has done it. We have such a great cloud of witnesses. Let us get rid of every weight and entangling sin. And then with endurance, run the race before us. Again, focus on Yeshua. That's the main thing. So keep the main thing. And then coming back off of that, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, disregarding the shame, and he's taken his seat on the right hand of the throne of God. So you've worked your way down to Yeshua and then back. So that's a chiastic structure of the first 2 verses. So that's chiastic structures are kind of for nerds. Okay. So anyway, therefore, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also get rid of every weight and entangling sin. Let us run with endurance the race set before us. Okay, so the witnesses that they're talking about here, here the scene shifts from the figures of Israel's past, all the patriarchs and all of that, to his present audience and their current experience. The author of Hebrews in this verse, or in this chapter, will be exhorting his readers and listeners on the theme of discipline, endurance, and he will ask them to consider the sufferings of Yeshua on their behalf. Now, I've told you many times before, I am not a Greek scholar by any stretch of the imagination. And but in reading this and the commentaries that I have, some of these Greek scholars do tell me that this chapter is written in a very flowery, poetic Greek form, very high Greek, where there's lots of plays on words, and it's an intellectual exercise. Just this particular chapter, I'll have to take their words for it, because looking at it in English, you don't really see it. But the things that are brought out here point to the Old Testament saints, having seen this cloud of witnesses, and also it would bring in this chapter will bring in things from the Maccabean period and some of the writings of the 4th book of Maccabees. And so anyway, the audience here, the Hebrew audience is first told to, it says, we have this great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. Now, it's interesting that I got this interlinear Bible that that I can read, and if you spend enough time on it and look at it and stuff, you can pull things out and make yourself look like a genius. But I'm only about halfway there, so instead of being very witty, I'm just only halfway there. But the writer here used a word. He used the plural or the collective verb for cloud, like clouds, and it was like the word that he used instead of Nephili, which is the just one singular cloud, up in the sky. He said the clouds, the massive clouds. And so I'm thinking of like thunderstorms and thunder clouds all around us and so forth. That's the word he uses, and that word is nephos, and it means a cloud, massive, a pile of clouds, and then it's also often translated as host. And you'll see that I think in uh, King James version, I believe they'll say then a host of witnesses, but that word is sometimes translated that way. So these witnesses, this cloud of witnesses, could be compared to spectators in a stadium at an athletic competition, where everybody's up there and looking on, and this kind of fits with the rest of what he's talking about here about endurance and running the race and keeping your eye on the prize. And so he's using these athletic metaphors for this part. And some people get their panties in a wad over the idea that he's talking about these pagan Hellenistic things like races and so forth. And well, so did Paul. Paul talked about running the race, and James had talked about some of that. And so the idea of, I mean, it's sports. Everybody, guys like sports and they understand it. And even though the Greek runners and wrestlers and so forth often um, um, competed in their birthday suits, well, that offends a lot of people, I guess. And so they get kind of wound up over this idea that that the writer of Hebrews would even go there. But he says, for us to get rid of, throw off any weights. Well, if you're going to be running a race, you're not going to have ankle weights on your, lead weights on your ankles, or you're not going to be carrying a rucksack or a big sack or things like that if you're going to be running a race. No, you're going to be running with the minimum things on you, the minimum clothes. I'm sure that these Olympic runners, that when they run, their clothes that they have on them are they weigh just mere ounces, and that helps them to make sure that they can run the fastest that they can. And so we as believers, especially in the Messianic community, we have to shed things that, especially if you are a Messianic believer that was not raised in Judaism, you have to adopt to and adapt and take on things that that you didn't know before, and then throw off some of the prejudices and previous thoughts that you had about Judaism and Jewish people. And then the same way that the Jewish people that come to faith in Yeshua, that is going to certainly change their lives. And so they have to kind of throw off some of the prejudices that Jewish people grew up again toward Christianity, like for instance, the Crusades. That you grow up thinking, oh, the Crusaders were good guys. Well, no. because when they went through Europe, how do you think that they financed their trip to the Holy Land to liberate Jerusalem? Well, they would go through these places and they would find the Jews, confiscate all of their property that they could, anything that they could carry, gold, silver, jewels, and that's what financed their trip. And so, in some cases, they the Crusaders rounded up all the Jews in a village or a town, put them in their synagogue, and then burned the synagogue down around them. Because they were getting rid of those people that killed the Christ. And so, those are kind of prejudices that Jewish people have to throw off once they come to Yeshua, and so basically the Jews and the non-Jewish people, believers in Messiah, have to get rid of their baggage. And I think that's what the writer here is talking about. Get rid of all of that baggage, and you can and then try to learn to get along with everybody, Jew and Gentile. Martha.
Yes, sir. Another thing that popped out to me was that in this race, I put it in quotation marks, to salvation, or whether to the end of our life on this earth in Christ, we don't always run the same race as everybody else. In the few little races I've been in, I noticed that my race was not my race. My race was against other people. And I found that to be a major downfall for myself, because I didn't train the way they did, and their pace might have been faster than my pace. And I had to learn how to run my race. So in our spiritual race, or our spiritual walk toward, holiness in the Lord, I've learned my pace is not the same as other people's paces. So I guess when we're running this quote race, to keep that in mind, our spiritual walks aren't all the same. Some of us go different paths and learn different things at different times, but all toward the end. The goal is the end, to be with Christ.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
I'd like to comment on that from Martha, but because that's, that I've always wondered about that too. In the beginning, I had asked a pastor, I was studying, and they were talking about, when you get your relationship with Yeshua, well, Jesus and whatever. And I was asking my pastor, like, well, when's it going to happen? When is this going to happen to me? How will I know? When will it happen? And, he can't answer that. It's different for everybody. Everybody's race to God is different. Yeah.
Well, in about 3 weeks, I'm going to be preaching a sermon on can the apostate ever return? And folding into that a discussion on once saved, always saved. And one of the things that I see is that our salvation is not a one and done. It is a journey, and the Bible tells us to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. It's something that we work on every single day. You never get to the point where I've arrived, and although the hyper grace people will tell you differently, but I look at it as our
It's an
life in
everyday
Messiah.
for the rest of your life.
Our life in Messiah, yes, it's
Yeah.
a life of repentance every day. We live in a life of repentance. Paul tells us to live in a state of prayerfulness every day. We never get to the point where we get, where we're independent of God and His mercies and what He can do with us. And if you ever get to that point, then you're probably in big trouble. And so I
No,
think that's
probably God will show you, no, you're not there. Watch this. And then you'll say, oh man.
yeah, exactly right. And so I think that's the way we have to look at this race. We're not competing with anyone else. What we're competing against is the world and the world system that would try to trip us up and to throw up barriers between us and our relationship with the Lord. So that's what we're racing
Yeah.
against. That's what we're contending against. I'm not contending, I'm not racing against Martha or Carmen or Joseph or Randy or Rich or anybody here. Um, you have your racetrack and I have my racetrack. And yeah, we're still all of us working toward the goal, and that is to live a life that is in consonance with the Word of God. And so that's our goal, and that's why we need to keep focused on that.
Yeah.
And so I think those are good points.
So our measurement is constantly looking back at ourselves and not comparing us to the next person on a spiritual journey, but comparing us to how close we are in our walk with the Lord.
Right.
That,
I mean, and because
yeah,
comparing yourself to someone else can be
scary.
dangerous on two levels, okay, and opposite ends of the poles, because you can, and I've seen this where people will say, I'll just never be as good as I'll never be as good and holy as Martha, and so I just might as well just not even try, and then somebody else will say, well, I tell you what, I'm better than Steve is any day of the week. So I've got this, And so when you start comparing yourself to someone else, that's not the measure with which you compare. You compare yourself to the standard of holiness that God sets out in His Word, and that's of course Torah, and then the life of Yeshua the Messiah and the things that He taught. That's where we compare ourselves. And okay, like David said, search my heart, O Lord, and see if there's any wicked way in me. And that's where we need to compare and come up with a measurement for us for how we're doing in the race, how fast or how well we're running the race, and that's how well we adhere to God's word and His standard of holiness. All right. So any other comments? Yeah, spent 30 minutes now on verse 1. Okay. And that's
Sorry.
okay. And that's okay. If we spent the entire hour on verse 1, there's so much in there that you know we could really stay in it a lot, and then I would start preaching, and then that would be the end of it. Okay, so focusing on verse 2, focusing on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and he has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. Okay, and I see that we have a chat here. Okay. Okay, Rich says the word, looking at verse 2, is G872, aphorio, meaning turning your eyes away from all things that distract and fixing them on Yeshua. Well, yeah, that was my next sentence here, is the Greek word aphorio, that as translated as focus, implies a continuing looking forward. Now, the way I look at this is, when you're training for a race, and I know with my kids and my grandkids, when they were in sports and you're out there watching them, they're running, and and when I would say, well, when I was in sports and running, well, no, I was not ever a very good runner, so I never had to look back behind me to see who was catching up, because I could see everybody in the race ahead of me. See, so I didn't have to worry about that. But it's you tell the kids, okay, keep running. Don't look back to see who's, you hear those steps coming behind you. Don't worry about that. You keep focused on getting ahead there and getting to the finish line as fast as you could. And so that to me is where how that word focus is utilized here, where you are everything that you have is tuned right into Yeshua. And if you get off to the right or to the left, then that's where you let other things, worldly things, or maybe not so, maybe not even bad things. Some cases you can even let your ministry get in the way of your ministry. And I think I talked about that yesterday in a sermon, didn't I? Okay, but um, it's one of those, and that's where I see this focus thing come in, and it can never be overemphasized that it's the very person of Yeshua that should be our focus, not the trappings of religion. We see this now. Those of you who are not attending Messianic congregations and so forth, this is maybe a little foreign to you, but in the Messianic movement, I would say, we have people all the time that they get into it, the non-Jewish people, they get into it and they look around and, oh man, we got the people that's got their little kippah, and we have the tzitzit that we wear, or on our prayer shawl, and so they get so enamored of the trappings of religion that they come derailed, and they get away from, guess what? The main thing is Yeshua. Keep the main thing the main thing. And it just, I see it all the time with people so desirous of wanting to be Jewish. And I look at us as folks. It ain't that big a deal, you are a Jew, I mean, and a Gentile are every much the same in God's eyes. So you're nothing special if you're Jewish. You're nothing special if you're a non-Jewish. So Martha.
I certainly can relate to what you're saying, because as my husband and I are trying to observe the Shabbat meal on Friday evening,
Mhm.
I'm going by this book that Rabbi Sobel wrote,
Yeah, Jason
aligning with
Sobel.
the anointed times. Yes. And so I'm trying to go line by line, paragraph by paragraph to get it all right. Oh, in this order, we have to read this prayer. Oh, now wait, I have to light the candles first. Okay, now don't forget the platter with the salt on it. And I want everything blue and white. So I am engrossed in the trappings of the ceremony, because I feel like once I get that right, then I can start to focus on what it's really all about. Otherwise, I feel discombobulated because I don't have the right fixings going on. But then later on, he said, you just have to, after he goes through all that detail, then he says, well, just make it your Shabbat meal. And I'm going, why didn't you say that at the front? Because now you got me all up in a tizzy about special candles, special challah bread, special, everything else. And I'm all wrapped up in the wine, and it's got to be kosher. And it's like, now you tell me I can just relax about it and just, so
Well, when you
maybe a
get
little
down to
better.
it, okay, think about that now, Martha. Everything that Jason Sobel wrote in that book about Shabbat and the Shabbat supper, I've got
Mhm.
over there, I don't even know how many, I don't know. They're in another bookshelf in another room of Siddurim that I have that talk about those kinds of things. Some of these books are that thick, and they go into such great detail that it's it's just kind of crazy. And so for us at our home, we have a very, very simple Shabbat, in comparison to other people. We light the candles, we say some blessings. And but since Pat cannot eat bread, you know, that she's celiac and has to be gluten free. Well, guess what? We don't have these great big challah loaves of challah. You know, we don't have 2 loaves of challah because I'm not gonna impose that on her when she can't even eat it. And so quite frankly, what we do is when we get to the part where we would have the blessing on the bread, well, guess what we use? We use Costco corn chips because it
Okay.
is a bread and it's something that she can eat. And you know, we just don't get wound up over it. The same with um, doing Passover. We have so many people in the congregation. You know that I encourage everyone to do their own family Passover at home each year rather than relying on the few of us to put together this elaborate thing that takes us weeks to prepare for. And so that all you got to do is pay your $25, you show up and be entertained for 3 hours, go home, and you're done. And said, well, that's not what the Bible called for. It calls for each household to have their own Passover. But people say, but what if I screw it up? What if I mess it up? How could you mess it up? Because it is so simple. All of that other stuff are the trappings of religion. These are things that, where you have the 4 glasses of wine. Well, show me in the Bible where it has the 4 glasses of wine. And oh, but what about the egg there on the table on the Seder plate? Okay, show me in the Bible where that egg is. And the horseradish, show me in the Bible where that is. The Bible just says bitter herbs. Well, that can be just about anything. For me, bitter herbs are parsley. You know, I hate parsley. I don't like it. Throw me some cilantro and that's better, but parsley, nah, I don't like it. And so um, you go through all these things and you can make it just as simple as can be, and you still are recognizing and thanking
Yeah.
God for his provision of bringing us out of slavery from Egypt, and that is a metaphor for Yeshua bringing us out of the
Our
slavery of
sin.
sin. Okay,
Mhm.
Yes.
so
Yeah.
that's where just don't, okay, what did Yeshua tell Martha? Don't worry about the small things. Don't sweat that stuff, okay? Come on out here and let's just come on in the living room. Let's sit down and just fellowship, and don't worry about whether the hors d'oeuvres are just right, okay? It doesn't matter. So, all right,
Yeah.
and
Who's going to
so
light the candles and who's going to breathe the blessing and who's going to do all that? If you don't prepare that, it's like, okay.
yep,
So yeah, we
exactly.
do get caught up in the trappings when we're first learning. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I do, and because I want to do get it right, to be
Sure.
honorable and respectful. But then later learning, like y'all already know, to just relax a little bit more with it and just honor the process. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the
we'll
same
get there.
with Havdalah the day after, the closing out the Shabbat. One of the things
Mhm.
that the ritual is, you light the Havdalah candle, you do the blessing, you sing some songs, and you got this great big glass of wine that you filled up all the way to the up to the top of it, and then you take your at the end of it, you take your Havdalah candle and you stick it in the wine. Forget it. I am not wasting a good glass of wine. Okay. So for us, we just I'll pour out just enough of it to take that Havdalah candle, stick it in the saucer and goes, psh, and then I'm done. And then I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
All
so,
right.
um, eh, you just get, I've seen people just really give themselves heartburn over trying to do that sort of thing. So don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. And Rich has it right here. It says, just make sure that you keep Yeshua as the prize. That's where we go. I see it too often in the Messianic movement, is where people get their eyes off of the Lord and try to bring in all this Judaism stuff, which is fine, but that is not the main thing. The main thing is Yeshua, and all the other things they're peripheral, and so don't get too wound up over it. Carmen?
And he tells us in his word, the ritual is not, don't get so hung up on that. It's your willingness to do this to honor God. And he's not saying, "Oh, you lit that candle wrong before you lit the other one." He's not watching and saying that. It's just, how good are they? Some people can't eat bread. Some people can't drink alcohol. So you might have non-alcoholic wine. Well, you make adjustments for your physical, that's all. What's not important, I believe, to God, is
Exactly.
just your willingness to do that, to honor him. Yes.
Yeah.
I think what stumped Ray was having to read that one about blessing the wife. What's an honorable wife? You mean I have to read all of that? And I just look at it with my hands on my hips. Yeah.
Well, no, tell Ray he does not have to read that. Okay, he does not.
Oh, I can't tell him that. I can't tell him that.
Okay.
He's got to read the whole thing. It's a
No,
blessing for me.
he's got to chant it. He's got to sing it.
Oh my, that's a big challenge. Okay. Okay, I'll tell him that. You said that. Rabbi said you have to sing it now. All right.
The shy keel. Okay, yeah, I know. It's
All right.
but those things, the blessing of the wife and the blessing of the children, it's all very symbolic. It's really good. It's good things to have, and it does bring on the Shabbat, and makes the Shabbat more more holy. And so that's why, that's why one of the reasons why we have the rituals and the things that we do, the traditions that we do. That is kind of what has kept that, and the grace and the mercy of God has kept the Jewish people alive for all these centuries, is because we did have structure to our lives. And it just, but at the same time, the Ashkenazi traditions and structure are different than the Sephardic, which are different than the Yemenis and you go down to South America, to Jewish cultures in South America, and it's different down there too, and having participated in that also. And so just the thing is, just keep Yeshua as our focus, and you'll be just fine. So and so here we go. It says, focusing on Yeshua, the initiator and perfecter of the faith. And of course, that's we know that he's the one that started it all up with us. He's the beginning and the ending of our faith. Okay, now it gets into the part about enduring the shame. Now, remember that the cross, a death on the cross during the Roman era, Roman times, was to a Roman, that was the greatest shame. I think Cicero, or I think it was Cicero, was talking about how that a Roman citizen being hung on a cross is just unthinkable. You don't even think about that, because it just should never occur. That was a death reserved for non-Roman citizens, and that it would be a great shame. And so, of course, the idea of the crucifixion was again a great shame. It was a very painful death, It was one where, you know, the person that was being crucified was hung up there. He did not, when they hung him up there, they were not wearing their white BVDs, okay? Their little whitey tighties. They were completely naked, and there again, you're exposed, you're vulnerable. Of course, you're vulnerable because you're nailed to this piece of board up there. And so the whole idea of it was very shameful. It was a punishment reserved for common criminals, for traitors, for people that violated Roman law to the extent that it became a capital offense. And so this was something that Yeshua suffered through. He was treated just as a common criminal, and it would have been to anyone else outside the Roman world that this would be, you know, this is a curse that's just beyond measure to be to be hung on a cross. And so that's where it talks about he endured this ultimate shame. And so what comes next, though, is that, to me, it just boggles the mind at how the suffering and the death could be compared or considered a joy, and yet Yeshua, as the example, he emulated joy in his suffering. He prayed in John 17:13, he said, "These things I speak in the world, that you may have joy made full in themselves." And after he was executed and resurrected, he was exalted, and he sits now on the right hand of the Father. And that's a theme that the author of Hebrews has already touched on. And so Yeshua, he promises to share his authority with those who endure on earth. In Revelation, at the I think is the church of Laodicea, he says that if those that endure to the end will be saved, and that's where that race comes in. You don't run just to the halfway part and says, "Well, I've run a good race. I just, I've done it. This is great. I've run this half of it, and I'm good to go." And see how far ahead of everybody else I am. I'm going to just cut out here because I've run a good race. They all know I can run fast. But no, it says you endure to the end. And he told them in the church in Laodicea, said, "He who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit down with me on my throne, as I overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne." So I think there's a commenter, a theologian named Paul Ellingworth, that said that the author wishes to end his period here, this part, with an emphatic affirmation of the permanent triumph of Yeshua, and thus, perhaps by implication, of the permanent effects of that triumph also applying to believers. And so Yeshua sits on the right hand of the Father, and he says, everyone else that that endures to the end will also be exalted. Now, when and how that exactly happens, I think that will be more likely in the period after the millennial period, but we're going to see a part of that even during the millennial period, where we will be. It says we will rule and reign with him, and that's going to be for that 1,000 years. And so I keep telling people that, what do you think of? Well, we're just going to float around on these clouds, these nephos, in heaven, and playing the harp and so forth. No, that's not what you're going to do when Yeshua comes back to the earth and rules and reigns for 1,000 years. There will still be roads to maintain. There will be there's going to still be jails and prisons, because a lot of people are going to will have survived the Great Tribulation, and they're not redeemed, they're not saved, and so there will be some people who still have part of that sinful nature with them. Otherwise, the Bible said, the Bible says that Yeshua will rule the nations with a rod of iron. And so he would not have to rule the nations with a rod of iron if everybody in the world that would remained, or that entered into the millennial period, if they were all redeemed with glorified bodies, changed incorruptible bodies, he wouldn't have to rule and reign with a rod of iron. So anyway, that is getting off of my notes, but that's okay. I did want to let's go ahead and look at verse 3. That may be as far as we get tonight, is verse 3. And that's okay. All right, consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary in your souls and lose heart. Okay, in this part here, so the reader should consider or think upon Yeshua, so that they might not grow weary of persevering and losing heart. Remember, his audience was in a point where he's trying to convince them that, okay, guys, don't give up. Don't jump overboard here just because things are getting tough, or stay with the program. Don't revert back to your former Judaism without Yeshua, because the Judaism without Yeshua is only an empty shell. And so he's telling them, do not go back to that. And so meditation on Yeshua and the cross then encourages us to follow God's will faithfully. And I think maybe it's natural for us to overestimate the severity of our trials, and the writer is saying, don't do this. Don't overestimate your severity. Look what Yeshua went through. And I see in this world, here in America, we have it so easy, because what kind of I don't know, opposition do you have? Okay, I can remember a commanding officer on a ship asking me, he says, "What are you, some kind of Jesus freak or something?" And because when in our wardroom, we always ask a blessing at the beginning of the meal. And when he came in and saw what we did, well, he put a stop to it, except for when he wasn't there. And then if he wasn't in the wardroom when we started our meal, we said a blessing, either me or one of the junior officers or one of the warrant officers. And so, okay, is that persecution? Yeah, in a way, maybe it is, but I never got lashed to the mainmast and hit with the cat of nine tails just because I prayed at the meal. But in other countries, when ISIS was storming through, Iran, Iraq, and all those places over there, the Christians that were there, these ethnic minority Christians, they were definitely what I would call a profile in courage. They were martyred. These people were giants of the faith, because even down to they had 12-year-old children that they tried to get them to renounce their faith in Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah, and they would not do it. And so the parents wouldn't do it. And so what they would do is they would torture the children. The children would not relent. Their faith was so strong, and sometimes they would kill the children and then in front of the parents, and then blind the parents so that that was the last thing they ever saw, and then crucify the parents. That's what ISIS did. Now, that is persecution. And that the idea that, well, the Lord's not going to have us go through that kind of stuff. He's just going to rapture us out, and so that all that bad stuff just doesn't happen to his redeemed people. No, Revelation tells us that there's the number of martyrs under the throne are uncountable. And so that whole idea of the escaping everything, that escapism, well, it's very attractive, but I think it's not the right thing. And I know there's some of you here that think the other way, but it's okay. We're not going to get into an argument or a discussion on that tonight. We don't have the time, and it's a different thing. But I think we need to understand that Yeshua is the key to, he's the key to the whole earthly problem. He's the cure for doubt. He's the cure for hesitation. He's a cure for depression. He is the cure for anything that would hinder us. And so I think the implication for this audience is if they were to relinquish their commitment to Yeshua under the pressure of this persistent opposition, then they would basically be opposing themselves. They would be in opposition against themselves. And so I think it's a thing that the author is trying to tell the people: don't give up, stay with it. Don't let the things of this world get you down to the point where you decide, I just can't I can't go with it anymore. I just have to give it all up. And because if you give it all up, you think, well, if I just renounce the Messiah, then they'll leave me alone. And no, they probably won't. So the writer here put his readers' sufferings and the sufferings that they were going to do, they were going to suffer through. Maybe they hadn't even started yet. In fact, we see in later verses that they hadn't even started yet. That he's trying to put that in perspective against what happened to Yeshua, so that they don't overestimate what they have to do to stay faithful to the Lord. And Yeshua told us, he said, look, in this world, you're going to have tribulation, you're going to have troubles, you're going to have trials. Just because you're a believer in the Son of God does not mean that you're now on easy street. But he says, don't worry about it, because I've overcome the world. In the end, he says, remember, at the end of the book, you guys win. And so suffering comes to all of us. It's part of life, but it's not easy to bear. And so it can be, and it's not so, let's say this way, it's not quite so bad when it is seen, when you look at it as being meaningful. Okay, the suffering that we may or may not go through in our lives, especially here in the United States, where most believers in Yeshua, when you get right down to it, are a bunch of wusses. They would never do what the ethnic Christians in the Middle East did. I mean, they would, the first little thing, pull out your thumbnail. Okay, I give up, that sort of thing. And so just I really have to look at those people that I think they're the Ascites, and that was their name of their ethnicity, and you just have to look at them and say, wow, those people love the Lord and they were strong all the way down to the very end. And so the suffering is evidence not that God does not love us, okay? Just if we suffer, that doesn't mean that God doesn't love us, but it means that he does because he's perfecting us, okay? Martha.
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking this, where it says get weary and discouraged. So it's almost like giving a picture of what the Israelites were doing when they got in the wilderness, looking back toward Egypt. Oh, if we hadn't left, we'd have this and that and the other. So in our struggle to overcome our sin or our addiction or whatever it is that we're trying to overcome, it's easy to go, oh, this is just too hard. And you keep looking back, and then you want to give up. So I love it when other Christian friends and ladies come alongside and encourage me to keep going and keep reminding. So they kind of come along both sides of you and walk you through it with you. And that's such a great help.
Yeah,
Just don't
and
look back.
and just remember that when one of those ladies then needs you to
Yes,
walk alongside her, so
absolutely. Absolutely.
um anyway, that's all right. Now I'll tell you what, folks, I'm going to shut it off right here because we only got through 3 verses, okay? And the fourth verse starts a new theme and a new tenor, I guess you would say. And I wanted to give that proper focus. And so we'll pick it up next week at verse 4, and we'll see if we can get through more than 3 verses next week. I don't know. We'll just have to see.
It's okay because we're just learning and discussing it all. It's okay.
Yeah.
Three
Okay,
verses,
good deal.
four
Hey,
verses,
Rabbi?
whatever.
You're talking about the fact that your wife has celiac screw, and I remember we wanted for a lot of people because we had a mixed congregation of Jews and non-Jews, and there were people wanted to know kind of how to do a Passover Seder, or not a Passover Seder, but just a Shabbat, and so we decided to get together to do it. But there was one person in the congregation there, a good brother, who had celiac screw very, very bad, couldn't even be anywhere near it. And so his wife would have to do cooking, and we didn't want him to feel left out. So I actually found a mold online. It's a mold shaped like a hollow loaf, and she was able to make her regular bread without any wheat. You go with the Bob's Red Mill or whatever you do, pour it in there, and turn it over like a bundt cake, and it's shaped exactly like a hollow loaf. And we all ate that hollow loaf, and they were able to participate. So I'm just saying that's an option for you and your wife if you
Oh,
go
we have
online.
one. We
Oh, you
have
do?
we have that same mold. It's a red silicon mold actually, and yeah, we have that. It's just that she says, well, that's an awful lot of calories too, and she's always working on that. And so I mean, and let's face it, the Shabbat ritual is a rabbinical thing. It's not biblical. It's a rabbinical tradition that was been passed down through the generations. And so we do part of it that we can, and the part of it that we have to
Right.
modify, well, that we just
Well,
modify.
but
So,
we did this in the context of a bunch of people who wanted to know how could
right.
we sit down
Exactly. I
and
understand.
do a meal together. So we did it, and this way we'd have a hollow loaf and have the candles and have the blessing and whatnot. But it was nice because it was a unifying thing
Yeah.
for
Oh
for
yeah.
the congregation.
Well, we've done that. I mean, we have actually done that exact thing where we'll have people and we're teaching. And so, she doesn't have a problem with making challah. I mean, she can make it outstanding challah. Because before we discovered what was making her sick was that she was a celiac, and this was 20, 30 years ago. She made homemade bread. We lived overseas, and so the only way that you could get good bread was we made it ourselves, sourdough bread. And so she made 2 or 3, 4 loaves of bread every week for the family. And so she knows how to do that stuff, and she can throw a challah together like crazy. But when it's just me and her right here, we do that, and it's just fine. She doesn't drink alcohol, so she drinks something else instead of the wine. And so, is it what would you say? Orthodox kosher? Nah, but it's still
Well, yeah, no, we're not going to do black kosher, I mean, we do
no.
biblical kosher. We don't,
Yeah, that's we're just
but
we do
you're right. You're
biblical
right.
kosher.
I mean, it's the heart of the matter, it's just
Yeah.
what, no, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
thank you,
And Rich
Rabbi. Great teaching.
left something, huh?
Great teaching. Thank you so much.
Okay. Rich left something here that I'm reading for the folks that are on the radio, on the telephones. Said, running the race, another word picture is climbing a ladder. You look up, not down. Safest way to climb is maintain 3 points of contact. Oh yeah, that's and be intentional, not distracted, depending on Yeshua for his grace to climb each rung. Holiness unto our Lord. There you go. All right.
Amen.
And that's a good word there. Alan, I saw that your mic was open there for a minute. I don't know if we pass you on that. Go ahead.
I just wanted to tell you, Steve, that I thought we had a really great discussion tonight, and a good and interesting, and keep it up, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And just coming from a classmate, that means a whole lot. So all of you guys that are not Coast Guard Academy classmates, then just I feel sorry for you. I really do.
Okay, thank you.
All right, guys. So
Well, Rabbi, I enjoyed listening to my brother's counting of his Coast Guard days and all. He thoroughly enjoyed those 4 years he was in there. They went to Germany on the Eagle. That's when they did that transatlantic clipper ship race, and he was on that one. And he went behind the Berlin Wall to try to get some genealogy on our my dad's side of the family, because we're all German. And it was amazing the tale he told. Now, I don't know how much of it was real and factual, or how much of it was just, embellished. But he said he got all of the German soldiers at the Berlin Wall drunk, and then that way they allowed him to pass through and get it to the church to where our records were, and then come back out and unscathed and back on the ship. And I said, "Oh my word, that is amazing!" So he had so much fun and hard times going through that time, but it's something that stayed with him forever. He enjoyed it.
Well, that's why I tell people when I get together with some of my shipmates or classmates or something like that we're going to sit around and tell sea stories and other lies.
Yeah, that's right. Whose ship is the biggest?
Well, and I tell people all the time, I says, I've got lots of stories, lots of sea stories, and some of them are even true. So there you
Frederick
go.
would have loved to sit around with y'all and swap stories. So
I'm sure he would have.
yeah.
Okay.
All
Well,
right.
are there
Good
any
evening.
other comments that we have tonight? All right. Well, if not, then Shavua Tov. Y'all have a good week. I'll see some of you on Thursday night, and the rest of some of you I'll see on Shabbat, and then the rest of you I'll see next Sunday night, and then we'll see how far we get with the lesson then. All right. Good night. Lila Tov. Shavua Tov.
Good talk.
Shalom. Shalom.